First obvious question is why? Why run for governor?
Why run for governor? That's an excellent question. For the last 6 months, I've been traveling around the state of Washington at speaking events and book signings. I'm the author of Loren Culp, and that came out the first of the year. I'm talking about our rights and the Constitution and the rule of law. And so I've been touring around the state almost every free day off that I have. Talking to people, signing autographs, and the response from everyone about my book and the issues was tremendous, and it just grew every weekend. And people started asking me if I would run for governor. And at first, I just kind of didn't really think about it, but as the voices grew from people that I was meeting and talking to, I decided to run for governor.
So you got talked into it basically by your fans, I guess, for lack of a better term.
Yeah. Their voices started ringing pretty true that our state's headed in the wrong direction. You know, and I think that Democrats and Republicans that have common sense can relate. You know, there's trash, human feces, and needles, and people camped out in people's backyards, behind their houses, everywhere on the street, and it's just lawlessness, basically, is what it is. And we need to be a country and a state that has law and order, and I can bring that to the governor's office.
Was this something that you ever saw yourself doing? I mean, just going to sleep at night, before the book, before anything, a run at politics or a run at any kind of government office besides, of course, Chief of Police, which you are now here in Republic?
Right, I'm appointed Chief of Police, not elected. I've never ran for office before. I've never thought about running for office. I'm pretty happy being here as a Chief of Police in this small town. But it's something that's necessary, I think. It just seems like there's a lack of common sense with our current leadership, and that needs to change.
Okay, you've made some allusions already to some reasons why you feel like things need to change here in the state, but what are some of the most important things you feel need to be changed for the people of Washington?
Well, like I mentioned, the so-called housing crisis, which I don't believe it's a housing crisis at all. It's an addiction and a mental health crisis. There's not a shortage of houses. There's not a shortage of housing. But probably 95 to 99% of the people that are on the streets are addicted to heroin or meth or alcohol. And there are a lot of mental health issues as well that go along with that. And I've dealt with the opioid crisis right here in Republic, and I know how to do it. It takes strict enforcement and compassionate treatment, and we've done that right here in Republic, and it works. I've had people that I've arrested for dealing heroin, and they've hated my guts when I arrested them. They went through the court system, they were forced into treatment or prison. They had a choice. And the ones that chose treatment came back and have thanked me for saving their life. They've got their family back, own a home, they've got their kids living with them again and have custody, and they have a job. And without that strict enforcement and then the treatment, that would have never happened, because these people are stuck in a cycle of addiction. And I don't know whether the leadership in the major cities and in our state understand that, or they're just ignoring it. I don't know. But I can bring a big change to that.
Okay, what else?
One of the big things is part of what I just mentioned, mental health. The facilities that are available right now for people that are in crisis are almost non-existent. We take people in, pick them up because they've tried to kill themselves and they're obviously in crisis. We take them to the hospital, and then they're evaluated by a counselor. The counselor looks for a bed for them to go to in a facility where they can get help, and there aren't any available. If you look at Western State Hospital, there's a $32 or $33 million contract to upgrade that facility, and $23 million of it has been spent, but nothing has been upgraded and nothing works. And that's just a lack of leadership, a lack of oversight.
Okay, so would you say, I mean, much like Governor Inslee, for example, his run for president is underscored by climate change. Would you say that, I mean, you're a strong supporter of Second Amendment rights, and that's really how you've gained some notoriety, but it sounds like your platform really is mental health. It's about the human crisis that we have here in Washington State.
Right, and the drug crisis. I mean, if what they're doing right now, in Seattle, for example, they are not arresting or charging anyone with possession of 3 grams or less of heroin. And that's a felony in this state. And that's right underneath the nose of our governor and our attorney general. And if you reward bad behavior, which that is, then you're going to get more bad behavior. You're going to get people moving here from all over the country because they're addicts and they can't stop, but they know if they come to Washington, if they have 3 grams or less on them, they won't get arrested, they won't be forced into treatment, they can continue in their cycle of addiction. And that has to stop.
What's your stance on the legalization of marijuana in years past here in Washington State? Some that were strong supporters of that, not happening, said that it's a gateway drug, and that was one of the big things. In your experience, is that the case? Is that something that you would work to repeal if you became governor?
Absolutely not. No, I wish that people would wake up a little bit, though, and not drive when they're high or drunk, either one. But I have no problem with the legalization of marijuana.
You have a common sense stance. It may be different than some people's, but I mean, I think that's something that resonates with all of us. How in the world do you run on a common sense stance for a political office? I mean, times are so polarized, as you know, and you're probably seen as a pretty polar figure yourself by people on the opposite side of some of the views that you have, but really it sounds like you're in the middle. How do you run on a common sense stance?
I've just had common sense my whole life. I used to live over by Olympia, and I ran my construction company over there for over 20 years. And in fact, my youngest son is still running that business to this day. I started in 1988 with a small Datsun pickup and a single axle homemade trailer, packing concrete forms from one job site to another, making multiple trips because I was just starting out, couldn't afford a big truck. And I built that into multiple trucks and multiple employees doing jobs all around Puget Sound, from backyard patio to multi-million-dollar projects. So common sense is something you have to run a business, and I know what it takes to run a small business in this state. And back then it was tough with the taxes and regulations, and I know what's going on now with taxes and regulations on small businesses. And we need to repeal quite a few things and get the tax burden off of the families and small businesses so that they can grow, hire more employees, and make this state what it should be, which is based on freedom. Not more government, not bigger government, not more taxes, not more regulations. I mean, when's the last time you heard of any state agency lowering regulations or lowering taxes? It just doesn't happen. A big government just continues to build upon itself, and the regulations and taxes go right along with that. And I'll do everything in my power to get those things repealed.
You're an open supporter of the Liberty State movement, correct?
What do you mean by open?
Well, you've been at the rallies, for example, around Eastern Washington. I know you made an appearance in Wenatchee at the rally there. So are you a supporter, I guess, of the Liberty State movement, the idea of dividing the state in two?
I'm a supporter of the entire state of Washington. I was invited to 2 events, one in Wenatchee, one in Spokane, to do a book signing and to speak about my book. And that's what I did. I spoke about my book, talked about our constitutional rights and what I put in that book. And then sign autographs. That's what I was doing at those events.
Okay, very good. I think it's important to clarify that, Loren, for people, because they might see you as a supporter of dividing a state that you want to be governor of, and they might find that counterintuitive. So how would you answer that? You kind of did, but address it again if you would.
Right. No, I support the entire state of Washington. It is lawful and constitutional for people to want to divide a state, but I'm for the entire state of Washington. and I intend to be the governor for the entire state.
Loren, what are some of the things that citizens should know about you besides your stance on these issues? It's something that I know when we first broke the story at our news outlets that on social media people were very curious about in different ways, I suppose, as far as how they formulated it. You have a lot of supporters just based on your stances for Second Amendment rights, for the things you've talked about so far today with me. But there were a lot of people saying, you don't know anything about this man. Well, what should they know about you?
Right, where did I come from? All of a sudden I'm all over the national news and sitting here talking to you. I was born in Everett, Washington. My dad was a state patrolman and my mom worked at the post office. And I went through grade school and junior high and my freshman year of high school in a small town, small farming community of Chimacum, Washington, which is right outside of Port Townsend in Jefferson County. And later my dad was a deputy sheriff for the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office. And so I grew up there, and then in my freshman year, my folks decided to move from the west side over here to Republic, and they bought the lumber yard here in Republic. And so I went and finished up my years here in high school and met my wife in high school, and then when I was 17, my dad was doing construction around here, and I was working with him in the summers and on the weekends, learning construction, and then they decided to move back. My parents got divorced, and my dad was moving back to the west side, and that was my job and where I was learning how to build. And I had met my wife a year previous, and I didn't want to leave her here, so we got married and then moved to the west side. And a couple of years later I joined the military. I went in the Army for 4 years, served in the 101st Airborne Division and the 2nd Infantry Division in Korea, and finished my 4 years there. Got out with an honorable discharge at the rank of a sergeant. And then worked in construction for a few more years, and then started my own business as a general contractor in 1988, and worked over there, ran that business for about 20 years, and then got tired of the rat race and decided to move back to a small town. And so we moved back here, and a job came open for a police officer. And I'd always thought when I was a little kid, my dad being a police officer, that's what I wanted to do. But by the time I got out of high school, he was doing construction, so I went into that field. But when the job came open here for a police officer, I thought, well, this is my chance to pursue my dream of when I was a little kid. And so at 49 years old, I went through the police academy with a class that was about half my age, and completed that. And I've been a police officer here for 10 years and a police chief for 3. So when 1639 passed, I just knew that it was unconstitutional to restrict people's right to keep and bear arms. And so when some people asked me the day after it passed if I was going to start arresting 18 to 21-year-olds if I saw them with a semi-automatic rifle, I said no. And so I was asked by a few people that day, and I put that message out on our Facebook page, and that blew up across the United States. And so that stance is the same way I feel about all of our constitutional rights, not just the Second Amendment. And so I was expecting other law enforcement, sheriffs and police chiefs to come out and say the same thing, and it took them a while. Bob Songer from Klickitat County came out a couple days later and said the same thing. But the rest of them were kind of just sitting back, I guess, waiting to see if I got my head chopped off or what. But that's what inspired me to write the book, because I was taught about our founding documents and our rights, as a young child growing up. And so I thought that I should put my thoughts on paper and decided to write a book. And so I wrote that book in about a month, and then the next month it was published, and then I started touring around the state, speaking to people, and that's how I ended up here talking to you.
It's been quite a whirlwind, undoubtedly. Speaking of taking the stance against 1639, you obviously didn't fear any backlash, or at least didn't think enough about your fear of backlash at the time when you came out. Has there been any? I mean, here you are, you're still chief of police in Republic. It seems like things are fine, but have you heard any rumblings from the official channels that, hey, you need to keep quiet about this, do your job, do the law, do what the law says?
I've gotten some nasty emails from obviously people on the far left, but no, the support has been tremendous. I've gotten emails from people all across the country, including in Australia and Great Britain, warning us about what happens when the government takes your firearms. And all that people have to do is look through history, and what has every country that turns into a dictatorship done first, and that's restrict firearms among the populace. And we didn't get our rights from government. Government, as most people know if you read the Declaration of Independence, governments were instituted to protect citizens' rights. And we didn't get our rights from them. They're there to protect them, and that's what our government should do. And this notion that the so-called assault weapons need to be banned, which I don't believe in that nomenclature anyway. Assault is an action, it's not an object. But if you look at the crime statistics from the FBI from 2016, there were 5 times more people killed with a knife or another object than any rifle, period. So the idea that we need to get rid of rifles or guns that look a certain way is absolutely ridiculous. If we're really wanting to save lives, wouldn't we be focusing on knives, which is 5 times more people killed by them, or automobiles? There's about 50,000 people a year killed by automobiles, and 400 to 500 with a rifle. So is it really about saving people's lives, or is it about controlling them?
Your campaign, talk to us about the steps that you have in mind for that, any strategies that you have. You're already all over the state, as you've been talking about, at different events, rallies, your book, doing a lot of signings. Running for governor obviously is going to keep you just as busy, if not even more busy. So do you have a strategy at this point? Do you have a campaign manager? I mean, people are kind of curious about just exactly what Loren intends to do from here,
right,
running against some of the big dogs, especially like incumbent Mr. Inslee, that is, unless of course he garners enough presidential support to move on with that endeavor. But what are your plans?
Well, I don't know that Jay Inslee is going to have any luck in the presidential campaign. I'm not even running, and I think we're tied for the presidential run. So I would imagine he'll probably run for governor, and that's great. I really don't care who's running on the other side. I'm going to run on the platform of common sense and law and order, and I think that resonates with Democrats who have common sense and Republicans who have common sense.
How do you intend to garner support? Are you going to make a lot of public appearances? Are you going to saturate the internet? Again, your strategy to get more in your camp. People that haven't heard about Loren Culp, or maybe they've kind of heard a little bit, but they don't know a lot about you. These kinds of things are going to start happening more and more, face-to-face interviews, people coming to the small town to talk to you.
Right.
There's going to be a lot of proliferation in the media, so, you know, to win their votes, essentially, how do you intend to do that?
I'll be traveling the state, meeting with people and speaking. And we already have a presence on social media. At Culp for Governor is on Facebook, and then we have a website that is culpforgovernor.com. And we'll have more events coming up. I've got 2 this week. I'll be in Grant County at the Grant County Fair on Tuesday for a couple hours, midday, and then Thursday I'll be down by Yakima. They're putting on a fundraiser down there for me. And then I think this coming Saturday is Stevens County Fair. I plan on being there for a little bit too. But things just started. I've got a campaign manager that's going to be starting full-time the 1st of September. I've got a campaign treasurer already in place, and we're gearing up for a big fight. I know that the other side has a huge war chest and a lot of connections, and have been in office for quite a while. But when you're right, and I don't let anything deter me. I'm sure that David felt the same thing when he was going up against Goliath, and that's kind of how I look at it. I'm just going to do what I need to do because it's the right thing to do for the people.
And that essentially answers my final question, but it's the elephant in the room, Loren. It's the big one that everybody has been asking, I think, since you announced. Can you win?
I believe I can win, yes, because there are people on both sides of the aisle, you know, not the extremes, but people on both sides, Democrat and Republican, independent. They have common sense and they know what's going on right now is wrong, but it's being allowed by our leadership, and that needs to change, and I will change that.
Okay, very good. Anything else you want to add?
I don't think so.
Okay, excellent. Well,
That's great.
that's 20.